side there. If you want to move in, there are a couple of seats. We're selling seats for double the price. I'm going to use this cane. This cane is the backbone of a shark. It came from Japan back in about 1870 or thereabouts. It's got a squid shark. How are we doing on seats? Everybody ready? Bethany, are you going to sit down?
I'm okay, I'm good.
You guys good?
Is your microphone on?
There you go. Good job. Great. All right. Do this. All right. Okay. So thanks. Great to be here. As Jack, thanks very much for the introduction. Glad we were able to keep that short. It's just absolutely great working with Jack. He's in with me all the time. It's like another staff person. It's fantastic. And we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the support of Jack and the board. And then just to reiterate, without the support of all you members, really appreciative. Jack wasn't quite so forceful in his comments. What we need is lots of money here. That's how we can do great things. And Bethany is here too, so I'm sure she needs lots of money down at Moore too, because the partnership between Lynn and us, it's like that last scene in Casablanca, I think. We're going to have just a wonderful time together. And my son and my wife is somewhere, oh, there she is, by the Baker Gallery. Here, let me come forward so they can see you. We have had such a wonderful welcome to Newburyport. My daughter is down the back there, waving. We're having a great time. And that's my daughter's boyfriend, actually, filming this. So, as Jack mentioned, I'm from Ireland, so I've actually felt like I've been pretty close to Wales for part of my life. I might have that right. These are some of the folks who helped put this talk together. I've talked about Wales, I've talked about whaling, I haven't talked about Newburyport, so I put the call out, and I want to thank everybody who made this possible. And we've got some show and tell, because as we went into the attic and looked around, we were able to pull a lot of items out that we knew we had, but they were a little dusty. And then we're going to have a big reveal somewhere through here that I think some of you are going to be pretty excited about. And I'm going to ask Bill Guy here in a moment to pick up and do a couple of show and tells. Jeff, who couldn't join us today, he's a little under the weather. This is his frontispiece from his Among the Whale book, which is a really terrific read. Marge gave me a copy, Marge Foltz gave me a copy of her book when I came here. It's a fast read, it's a fun read, and you'll see throughout the course of the talk today, a lot of the places that the Merrimack went will be highlighted. This is a great drawing, I think, and it just captures so much of the whaling voyage with this light behind me and this chap writing and the hunting the whale there, going on the whale, and the bark in the background. When you think of whaling, think about the first time you've heard of whales, and not only does it go back millennia, it's written into the Bible. And here's Jonah being spit out by the whale, but you see this in popular culture throughout. But when you read this saying, and you think about whaling in the 18th and 19th century, you're going to say, boy, that was, slaughter, it was terrible. But you have to remember the mores at the time. That's not the case when we get into the 20th century, and I hope I've got some time to talk a little bit about whaling in the 20th century too, which is not a fun proposition. But it's this idea that man has got dominion over the birds and the beasts. So you see this reflected throughout Melville and the themes throughout his Moby Dick. A brief history of whaling. I'll take questions at the end, if you don't mind, just to run through the 125 slides I have. So what you're looking at here, think about whaling very early on. People have obviously been whaling for a long time. A lot of whales would wash up on shore. What do you do with this? Obviously, rendering oil goes back to Babylonian times where there are clay vessels, and they clearly had whale oil which was rendered to light. You think back to Norwegian times, which is the very early whaling, and also Japanese whaling, which goes back thousands of years. The Basques started whaling fairly aggressively in about the 1500s or so, and I'll show you a map of Monday, map of the world, map of Monday. They're off the coast of Newfoundland. Before the Yankees got involved, you'll hear me using the term Yankee whaling. Before the Yankees got involved, Britain, France, Dutch were actively whaling in the North Atlantic. Then Yankees really created a strategic differentiating factor, which I'll talk about, which petered out, well, sometimes after Titusville was the discovery of oil, Civil War, a number of other factors. But you can actually blame women, which is great. I love blaming women for a lot of cause. And of course, it had to do with corsets and that going out of fashion. So we didn't have to kill whales because we didn't need the baleen. By the way, baleen, Bill, did you pick up the baleen? Have you picked things up? This is baleen. Vanessa will now show the baleen. Not to me, to the crowd. So this is baleen, and it was used.
I didn't know I was doing this.
You all set? Thanks, Bill. These are all up here to look at.
It's the high water mark of my career.
It's going to spin the slide. And then the 20th century really is the decimation of whales in terms of population extinction to an extent which is remarkable. Now, when we're talking about whales, we're really talking about in the 18th and 19th century. We're talking about the right whale, we're talking about the sperm whale, and we're talking to some extent the very acrobatic humpback whale. We're not talking about the finback, and we're not talking about the blue whale. Any ideas why we're not talking about finback and blue? Why?
They're big.
They're big.
No
They're too fast. How fast can you row a rowboat? These guys are the greyhounds of the sea. I mean, these things, they just outrun you. Not only that, how ignominious of them. They sank. If you kill them, they actually sank. Well, not much good killing a whale if it sinks, right? So the specific gravity of these whales, because they had so much blubber on them, was such that they were perfect whales to rest down. The North Atlantic right whale, which comes off just the coast of, is highly endangered. They'll be coming up right around now. They're breeding down in Florida, and sometime in February and March, they'll come off the coast here. And there's about 300 to 400 of these left, and we'll see what it is make it. But there are South Atlantic right whales, and then there's North and South Pacific right whales. We'll be talking mostly about right whales and sperm whales through this. So here's a sperm whale. You can tell the sperm whale by its spout. Also, in this cavity here, this is where there's spermaceti. I won't get into the origins of that term. And then you have the flukes. You can always tell a whale because its flukes are horizontal instead of fish, which are vertical. But if you look at this quick, Yankees dominated the whaling industry throughout the 18th and 19th century, boldly departing on thousands of voyages, crewed by tens of thousands of men, hunted hundreds of thousands of whales, and rendered tens of millions of gallons of oil. And the only thing missing there is how much money did they make, but it's very difficult to actually compute from early in the 19th century into the 20th century. But you just need to look at mansions in Nantucket and New Bedford and here, and you can see that this is obviously a very profitable business if you're able to retire at the age of 30 or 35 and have a mansion like that. So here is a fact on the amount of sterling which came into the colonies just before the Revolutionary War, where it accounted for 53% of sterling coming in, which is quite dramatic. And there's an approximation of this is a short burst. And Newburyport is in this span of time between 1804 and 1876, approximating $1/3 trillion. Not exactly sure how you come up with that number, but it's still a lot, and it's very profitable. This chart shows there are 3 whaling capitals in America over a time from early on through really the end of whaling, Yankee whaling, age of sail. The first is, no surprise, in Nantucket. The second period is the golden period in New Bedford. And the third is with the Transcontinental Railroad. Why would you hunt whale in the Arctic and go around the Horn to bring it back to New Bedford when you can go into San Francisco and you can ship it across the railroad? Now, interestingly enough, this period, there's very little information. So as we're talking about vessels that leave Newburyport, you'll see that I think the earliest is an unknown vessel from 1786 or something like that. But we know little beforehand, but that's okay because there are very few log books in Nantucket and New Bedford and various places to talk about this period. It does bump up a couple of key points here. American Revolution, war's never good for business. Boats that stay in port, happened here, happened elsewhere. Whalers are reaching Hawaii, so we're seeing global pursuit as early as the 20s. You see that with the Essex, obviously. There's the gold rush, many of the vessels here, bringing people there. You have the discovery of rock oil, which is essentially petroleum. Hey, guess who was able to distill the rock oil coming out of the ground? It was the refiners, it was the whale refiners who said, maybe it's time to move our business strategy away from whaling. You double down, you get out of the business, or you change your business strategy and go down to Pennsylvania. And many of them did that. The discovery of spring steel and later plastic was one of the reasons why whaling decreased, because by then there was no need to hunt whale for oil. You were hunting it for baleen, which was a pliable plastic-like material. Well, that was more cheaply produced by steel. And then it really peters out when the Norwegians get into the market, and then we get into 20th century Europe. Here's a snapshot, just to give you an idea of magnitude. This is some great work by folks here. I did very little of this myself. So we know that there are about 17,000 whaling voyages over a 200-year period. We know that because there's a great database called whalingvoyages.org. Loom contributed to that back in the day, some great stuff in there. This is what we found from that, and you can all check this out. There are 58 vessels built in Newburyport, and they went on 464 whaling cruises. 11 vessels from Amesbury. What's the most famous vessel from Amesbury pertaining to whaling? There you go. 17 vessels built to, oh, sorry, I've got Amesbury listed twice. That should be Salisbury, sorry. So I think it's 11 in Salisbury, it's 17 in Amesbury, whatever. And then in Hugh. The first is this unknown vessel in 1784, the Minerva. See the name George Pollard? What was the name of the captain of the Essex? George Pollard Jr. Isn't that wild? And a relatively small vessel, right? 157 tons. And the Merrimack, that's what this book is all about. She sailed out of here a couple of times, 3 times, and then she went down to New London as a port. But this is the first vessel. That was John Lee's. And you can see the size. It gets up to 414 tons. That's like Charles Morgan, just to give you an idea, the Charles Morgan Mystic. Now the lifeboat is really cool. I put this in because this is, I love this. This is the crew list from the lifeboat, Life Space Boat. It's a schooner, and it's a whaler out of Newburyport. And you can see exactly who went on it. and it's signed by the deputy director of the Customs House. Pretty cool. And then the last is the Georgia, which is one of the last vessels to leave, and I'm not the person to talk about this because this is totally Bethany's domain, because there's your man, Ebony Bradbury. So thank you for bringing him to my attention the other day, which is really cool. And there's a logbook of that down in Newburyport. And now, by comparison, if you look at large vessels built here, you're looking at about 250, give or take, large vessels, including clippers, built in Newburyport. So it's not insignificant. It does show high degree of productivity. It shows strategic depth. And you can see that if you're counting up 100 vessels between Salisbury, Amesbury, and Newburyport, that's not insignificant compared to 250. So that's the thesis of my talk, so to say. Now this, which is again online, shows a couple of things, not to spend much time here, but it's looking at oil and bone. This is sperm oil. This is the magnitude of sperm oil which is collected. This goes in a scale. The scale rolls up and down. I stopped at 1837, which is around the time of the Merrimack coming back in. And you can see that 6,300 barrels was landed or sent home, and that was valued at just over $3.5 million. And there is a folder to my right, and Carrie Poirier put this together, and you can see repeated notations in here encouraging people to get into the whaling business because there's a lot of money to be had, and stories related to that. Okay, reset. Let's go back to start of whaling in the North Atlantic in a serious way. This is this Mapamundi, 1546, and it shows a coin. This coin, if you can see this at the Whaling Museum in, who's that place in Spain? Churchill went to it all the time. San Sebastian. You see this in San Sebastian. You can tell they're hunting right whale. You see this here? And you see the spout. So a sperm whale, it goes forward, but this has got two blowholes, so you can always tell a right whale because of that. This is a late 17th century. This is Abraham's store. It's just about as grisly as it comes. You got a wreck over here. They've got a whale here which they brought alongside. They've killed these whales. They would put waifs, W-A-I-F, waifs in the whales. This was property. They would float. And the color on the flag of the waif would correspond. So there should be a red flag on a red waif. They also try to fill their holds, not just with whale oil, but they'll get a jump on the season by hunting polar bear, walrus, seal. So they can sometimes fill, a quarter of their holds before they get going. The big difference, though, as you'll see, is that the whale was flensed in blanket pieces. They would pull these strips up. They would put them in caskets, either bring them back to where they came from, England or Holland, or they would render them on shore. And the big difference with Yankee whaling is they decided it'd be a really great idea to put flammable oil on top of, which is on an oil-stained deck in the middle of the ocean. And believe it or not, there are no records of whaling vessels being set ablaze. Or at least intentionally. So I think works other ways. But, this is John Ward. Bucolic scene. It looks like a painting that Constable would paint, right? It's very serene. It's almost bucolic. They're out for a little day in the woods. And these poor unfortunate creatures, the narwhals, the sea lion, the seals here, you see the walruses rather, two walrus tusks there. They're all about to get killed, which is very sad. And here you can see another shot of it. Here is the blanket piece. Because the whales were buoyant, You know when you peel an apple, you know the machine that peels the apple and goes around and around? You turn the whale around, it's buoyant, so it rotates, and that's how you're able to pull up basically a strip of bacon. It's bacon, essentially, that you're putting into a big cauldron, and what do you do with the bacon fat? You pour it off, you let it cool, it goes into the hold, and that's what they're doing here. This is whaling beginning in the US. This is 1640 and started on Long Island. Not surprisingly, just like all over the world, a whale would wash ashore and it became property. People are cleansing it here. This is a connection from someplace. And as a result of this, laws were written around who owns the property, who owns the whale, and it got quite litigious. This is a fascinating map written by Benjamin Franklin and one of the Folgers, I forget his name, the first name, but 1768, and it's the first documentation of the Gulf Stream. And the reason why Franklin and Folger knew about this stream is because where would the whales eat? Where would the baleen whales get their food sources? And it's right where the waters are turbulent in the ocean, and that described this Gulf Stream. Interestingly enough, when Franklin went to England in his diplomatic pursuits, he brought this map with him, and the Royal Navy dismissed it. How could a farmer from the colonies possibly tell the Royal Navy what to do? So then Franklin went to France. This map is in French, if you can see it. It's a French version. The French sent spies to England to buy up all the maps that were given the Brits. And this was essentially intellectual property that they used for trade. Now, if somebody's got a spare 20,000, let us know, because we'd like to buy this mezzotint, which is on sale at Christie's in the next week. Well, I'm giving you a week. And it's dedicated to the grandniece, Sally Davenport, who I bet you all know from Newburyport. So that's pretty cool. And maybe we'll go halvesies with William. She's got all the big butt though. Okay, here's a cool story. Boston Tea Party, right? So in 1760, John Hancock inherits a bunch of cash from his uncle who dies, very wealthy man, and John Hancock became very wealthy. So he thought it'd be a good idea to try to corner the whale oil market. And so he went head to head with the Roach family. There's some roaches here in the audience today, by the way. Any relation to the Roach family in Nantucket?
I don't.
Oh, can you find out? Because I got this mezzotint I want to buy. So it goes hand to hand with the Roach family. And, well, it didn't work out very well for John Hancock. So Hancock's point was, look, I've got all these trading vessels. I speak English. I have my contacts in England. I've got trading vessels and merchant vessels. So all I need to do is corner the head matter market, the oil market, and then I'm going to be able to control this. Well, the Roaches didn't like that. They had whaling vessels. Well, they could also speak English. And they could easily convert their whalers into transport vessels. As a matter of fact, it's one of the reasons why so many of the vessels built here were converted into whalers at some point in their life. It was relatively easy to do. And so he lost a lot of money. He lost his fortune. So cycle forward to that fateful day, the town meeting in Faneuil Hall. Kind of interesting that it was the Dartmouth that was owned by the Roaches that just happened to come in with a whole pile of tea. And I'd imagine that probably Hancock felt pretty good that he could get one back in those Roaches in that time. I'm just speculating. So why hunt whales? So, I mean, why on earth would you do this crazy business? It's not a fun pursuit at all. Never was a fun pursuit. So according to the BBC, King Charles, when he was crowned, when he had this prism oil put on his forehead, it was animal cruelty free. But before that, sovereigns from around the world would have part of this. Now, this lump of stuff is kind of interesting to put in the forehead, because when a sperm whale eats squid, the particles get stuck in its gut, and it forms something called ambergris. Now, it smells just about as bad as hard as it is to say, but in time it was used as a fixative. And believe it or not, there are tons of ambergris in some of the vaults in France today where they make some fine perfumes, but in Charles 2 years ago. But of course, I couldn't talk about England without talking about Ireland. This is St. Brendan. He supposedly goes across the ocean, and where does he say Mass? On the top of a whale. So that is one of the things that you're trying to get from a whale. If you find in the belly of a sperm whale ambergris, your voyage is made. Forget about all the oil, you're going to make millions of dollars. And the next reason is oil to keep you safe. How do you keep with the Industrial Revolution booming in the UK first, and obviously France and elsewhere, but also the US, how do you keep the lights going? How do you send the guys down to gold mines? How do you keep working? How do you keep workers working past sundown and before sunup? Well, guess what? It's with whale oil, which is brought in, which is kind of crazy to think that a kid could hop in a vessel made in Amesbury, gets on board in the port of Newburyport, goes around the Horn, goes into the Pacific, visits Hawaii, kills a couple of sperm whales, brings that back here, it gets rendered, all to be transported over to England so that it can go into a light. Right? That's global business. And here we go, the women again, now starting before the revolution. This is Timothy Dexter. Don Roberts sent me this yesterday, I just had to put it in. Apparently this guy, he tries to monopolize, it's called whalebone, but it's baleen. It's what Bill was showing you. And this is so pliable that it made corsets. And so here's a corset. And we talked about how that was all the rage until it went out of fashion sometime in the late 19th, early 20th century. But apparently he made a lot of money for buying all the baleen in Boston. Now, we've got Plum Island Lighthouse. Who would you get? All right, I've already given you the answer. Who would you guess is one of the largest government purchasers of whale oil and sperm oil in the country? Lighthouse Service, right? Because you need to have clear, bright light, and in wintertime like this, it's not gelling up, and in the summertime, it's also reliable. So they were one of the largest purchasers until they were able to resolve, after the rock oil came in and Titusville, the distillates were highly volatile, but when they were able to stabilize those, they were able to transition out, and obviously when electricity went in, oil was not used. But I need Vanna White to the stage again. That's you, Bill. This is so cool.
It is.
Yeah, right under you got to do the big unveil. So,
Yeah, boy.
so,
All right, let me tell this.
okay.
I've been carrying this, everybody in my family, I've been carrying this around my whole life. And when I brought it down to James, he's the first person that knew what it was and appreciated it. So this has been my family along with that sperm whale tooth for probably 130 years. That's all I've been carrying around. So if you look at it, in fact, it's been all over the country with me. Nobody liked it. Everybody wanted to throw it away. And it actually says sperm oil on it and a price per gallon. So when I showed it to James, he actually had a So if you're looking at, one of my kids probably 40 years ago put a trick-or-treat candy in it. That's right. So we've been researching this, and this is from Newburyport, along with that sperm whale too. So both of these items have been together. When in my family, I'm fourth generation Newburyport. I grew up on the waterfront. My father had a fishing boat down Plum Island. I've been on the water. My father used to call me a river rat. I've had other stuff down here, but James is the first one to appreciate it. And as far as we know, it's probably
Oh, that's, it's gotta be probably the 1860s.
what we've been trying to put it back to the whale oil that may have been in the lighthouses around this. But that's how long it's been in my family. But when I showed it to him, he goes, "Geez, you ought to smell that." I went, so I looked at it, I go, "I don't know if I want to smell it." So when you do, it doesn't. I don't need it. So anyway, that's going to be displayed down here with you know, with the whales too. And that's the lights I have downstairs. Well, that's the future. Appreciate it.
When he brought her in, I thought it was a crapper. It's great, it's great. I've not seen one of these. I've been in the game 15 years in the whaling game, and that is just fantastic. And I love it that it ties to the lighthouse, right?
The Newburyport whaling industry.
And come up and smell it. It smells like linseed. It smells like linseed oil, just to be clear. Okay, we're on the whys. We're on the whys for whaling. So here's a why. So the lights, when you measure a light, right, it's a lumen, right? It's 1 lumen or however. So where did they come up with feet and measurements and pounds and stone? Where did they come up with lumen? Lumen is 120 grams of spermaceti wax, which is from whaling. Benjamin Franklin, of course, he had a vested interest in all of this, right, because he's related to the Folgers. And you'll see here, instead of cursing the darkness, light a candle, and then there's this little plug that he sends a guy. So these candles, they didn't drip, they were very bright light, they were perfect for the lighthouses, right, particularly with the Fresnel lens. It was quite dramatic. And it's not an oil. So in the head of the sperm whale, and we'll get to it, that spermaceti is chemically different from the rendered blubber, which is oil. And when it was compressed, there was a Sephardic Portuguese Jew who figured out how, in Newport, how to compress this stuff to eventually get the wax. And that was the real deal. More on that. Okay, why did Yankees dominate global pursuit? They invented a technique to separate the head matter as early as 1750. Probably a chap who was trying to escape many of the wars in Europe at the time came over here. And it was the first monopoly in the colonies. Try-works on board, we talked about that, right, where you put these coaling on board and light a fire. Great idea. Whale boats, a simple thing like a dory, but just modifying it so that you could get out of Dodge as quickly as you went in, because when you're going on a whale boat, and you hit it with a lance, might be a good idea to get out of there quickly. So that was a pretty good invention. And then the lay system, I'll show you one of those in a moment, was an incentive, and it's really what differentiated Yankee whaling from England or France. And it's simply this. If you have a crew that know they're going to get a couple of pennies, whether it's good weather or bad weather, well, maybe when the bad weather comes, they don't go out in their whale boats when they see the whales, right? But if you're incentivized by every whale you kill, you're going out in all sorts of conditions. So simple, just capitalism at work. And then the Temple toggle harpoon, I sent it, make sure you're all on the email list, because I sent this out yesterday. You want to do this? No? This, so an escaped, so he escaped slavery. His name was Lewis Temple. Black guy, came up from Virginia, and he was a blacksmith. Went to New Bedford. I think the date was 1840 or 1848 or so. He invented this device. Now, they've been hunting whales for thousands of years, right? So, like, you got to build a better mousetrap. And all the harpoons, and if you look at shapes of harpoons, they've got all sorts of funky heads with barbs and all the rest. The trouble is they go in, but they pull out easily. And so you've gone to all that effort. You may have been out there for months and not seen a whale. You finally get a whale, you stick it with a harpoon, and the thing pulls out. Well, you're going to be a little annoyed. So what he decided was, what if I put a little piece of wood in here, and it pivots around this point, so when it goes into the whale, this wood breaks, and this becomes a T. And now, that doesn't come out as much. And this simple device, that simple trick, absolutely revolutionized the game because the capture rate went way up as a result of it. He didn't copyright this, and he died of boredom. But great story, right? And it goes to show African Americans in the trade. Here is a copy of the Spermaceti Trust. Again, this is this chap, Rivera, who came over from Portugal. And I'll show you what the press looks like. So this is the press. This is on Nantucket. And this is from the spermaceti that's in the head of the sperm. And it goes into these bags. And then over a process of cooling in the winter and summer, this gets pressed and cooled and pressed and heated and pressed. And over a period of time, in this goes to a barrel underneath here, and that's where you're draining off your oil, and then what's left in the bag is the crystallized wax. And it's from that wax that they're able to make the sperm oil. This is the only candle factory extant, I believe. I don't think there's another example in the world today. This is an example of try-works. So you have cauldrons, which would be about this size, about 4 feet diameter, 3 feet diameter. You light them from below, and then you feed the whale oil in. And here's an example of the double-ended whaler, and he's about to harpoon the whale. This is, I thought this was delayed, only because I didn't have my glasses on. It's actually Herman Melville signing up for a voyage. And there is Herman Melville's name right there. He's signing on to the Acushnet from Fairhaven, which is right next to Acushnet. And his lay was 165th. So he wouldn't get a lot of money, and because he never returned, he didn't get anything. But he did write a really good book. I threw this in because it's one of the few pictures I could find of a vessel, a whaler from Newburyport. This is, you can see it's got New Bedford on it, but this is the Milo. No relation to Benjamin Russell, unfortunately. This is a typical whaler in the mid-19th century. It's got a large hold. It's got there's your try-works, and you'll notice the number of whaling boats on here. This model, which was up in the attic, is up the Cape Cory. It's not too much bigger than the Essex. Unlike the clipper ships, which had very few crew, these would have, well, there were 21 who actually started out in the Essex and went down to 20 before, well, they started with themselves. But a clipper ship would have much fewer crew. These would be heavily loaded up, and a vessel like this would probably have about 35 crew. So pretty large, and you can see this, they obviously want lots of whale boats because that's what they're going hunting on. So what do? This is up in the Arctic, not a fun job. You're looking out, spotting a whale, there she blows. And then this is a clip from Heart of the Sea movie with Chris Hemsworth in it. I had the pleasure of meeting him down in New York. It was pretty cool when they launched this. They were asking us for advice. As if the whales are a little big. This is a great print. They're going on a sperm whale. You know it's called a sperm whale because of this distinctive shape. I'm not sure where they're off here. You can see he's getting ready to put a harpoon in. The difference between the lance and the harpoon It's like in Jaws. You know when they shoot, you know when, what's his name? Lindsay, whatever his name is. That shoots the barrel into the shark. You're not killing the shark. You're tiring the shark out. And the barrel is the boat. So your harpoon sticks in with the temple toggle harpoon, and then you go on the Nantucket sleigh ride. And you can imagine if you're a kid, you don't, well, first of all, if you're going out in a whaleboat, you don't have a lot of money. So you don't own a horse. This is before you've been on a train. You probably sledded down a hill and it's felt pretty good. But you're not being pulled ever at 20 knots by a sperm whale, which is what these guys would have had happen. So they're flying, it must have been an exhilarating experience. It was a really good clip, actually, in Hard to See. And also the 56 movie with Gregory Peck, which just a great job for all the preservationists here, because when the 56 movie was made, Hollywood came to New Bedford. They hadn't adopted preservation yet. It's actually filmed in Youghal, Ireland, and it wasn't until, because of the success of the movie, it wasn't until tourists came to New Bedford to say, hey, where was this great scene? It wasn't there, but they realized that they should probably invest in preservation. Great story. Here's another fantastic drawing by Jack Briggs. This is a whale rising, sperm whale rising up. This is Gardner. He's a French artist. He just gets a lot of action here. This is a sperm whale coming up and breaking the backbone of the whale ship. Oh, a whaler, rather. This is fascinating. This is so you now know that this is a North Atlantic right? Because it's got two flukes. The color print of this is actually, it's a flurry of blowing, it's fire in the chimney, they'd say, and it's blood being squirted up. But look at the composition of the crew. Black, pretty interesting, I think. He's about to lance it, so the whale is tired, and he's trying to go for the vital organs in the whale, trying to get the lung and the heart to kill it, so it goes into a flurry. You can see the waif, there's that waif I was talking about earlier as they roll the whale back, and here is the blanket piece being hoisted up with the tri-works ablaze in the back. No OSHA regs back in the day. Can you imagine, there's a later version, they improved on this, but the early versions, so the Essex, would have had a little stage like this. Now, I presume there would have been a rope or something which ties you, but the whales would have been attracted to all the blood by the hundreds. As a matter of fact, so this is a sperm tooth which is just being hauled out of the mandible from the sperm tooth. And you can see all the ridges in it. The one that Bill gave us is a polished tooth. So they would use their jackknives to polish this. Those sharks, they'll kill a shark. They use the shark skin as sandpaper. So this was smoothed down on the ocean, because you're not bringing sandpaper with you. You can't go to the hardware store. And you're using shark skin to sand it. But what a crazy proposition to be doing this, rolling this whale over and over. And here are two shots. Somebody has to climb down, put a chain on here, and then you're hoisting up. This is a sperm whale because he's got teeth, right? It doesn't have baleen. And now they created this stage, this plank here where you walk out and you're cutting. They're out there cutting the blubber. And then by block and tackle, they're pulling up these blanket pieces, swinging them over, and then some unlucky chap has got to go back down again, put a hold of the skin, they start cutting, and they bring it out. Okay, this is because Martin Luther King Day tomorrow, I wanted to make sure that we talk about really interesting role played by black sailors, and this came in from Kerry just yesterday. And I thought this is just great research. So at the Essex Museum Storage Center in Rowley, they have the Custom House records from this period. And she's identified 270 sailors for men of color. And you'll see it on the list over here because it describes the complexion and the hair color of crew. So I would be no hair and fair skin, but it'll say skin dark, hair black, so you can infer. And specifically, it says somebody's from Cape Verde. But this is fascinating in the sense that we're now quantifying to some degree how many sailors of color sailed out of Newburyport. I think it's good research, and more work needs to be done on this. How are we doing on the time, by the way? Everybody good?
Yeah.
I just see a couple of people sleeping, but not storage. So I was just thinking through what the value chain is here. Raw materials, abundance of oak pine coming down the Merrimack, right, coming from New Hampshire. Transportation down the Merrimack, fairly straightforward. Lower Merrimack, concentration of shoreside industries specializing in boat building, rope walk, sail making, all of those types of things. And obviously skilled craftsmen. Who are these skilled craftsmen? We've got to talk more about that here. And then from there, it goes to places where they have other strategically differentiating characteristics. For instance, people who've actually gone out in the whale ships, etc., and capital and crew. So I see that very simply as the value chain. Now, here is some really cool stuff. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but these are Newburyport vessels used at some time in their life that we've been able to determine in whaling. Now, there's the Milo. Do you remember that sketch of the Milo that I showed you earlier? 1811. Look at this. During the Civil War, she was captured in the Bering Sea, which is way the heck up there, by the Shenandoah. She was bonded. There were a couple of other vessels which were set on fire by the Shenandoah. She was bonded and the crew went back to San Francisco. The Raja, I think that's how you pronounce it, interesting name, lost in the, how do you pronounce that? Oshkosh? It's right. Okay, I'll get back when we're over COVID. But that's off Vladivostok. So, and this is right, let me see, what's the date on this? Okay, 58, so that's before Russia has sold Alaska. It's before Transcontinental Railroad, right? The Meteor, Stonefleet. See, it says Stonefleet, sunk in 62 at Charleston Harbor. There are three, I think. This is where the Union Navy decided it'd be a great idea to block the Confederates in Charleston. And, of course, the merchants here who have these really old vessels, which were leaky and rotted at this point. But you know what? They took the government money, and a bunch of vessels went down to Charleston, and they were deliberately scuppered in Charleston Harbor, and it didn't work. That's where a lot of the vessels went. So in Honolulu, the Bowditch, great names. Here's the Merrimack. It was eventually condemned in Honolulu in 58. There was a crew, why Honolulu, right? So the captains and the owners said, we don't want you to bring your vessels into San Francisco. Why? Because everybody jumps ship and they become a 49er. There's a massive and you go there now, and that's a fact. It said, do not bring your vessels to San Francisco. That's why you see Hawaii. It's why in Lahaina, with the fire there last year, one of the great tragedies in Lahaina was the whaling. As a matter of fact, the reason why there's a Portuguese community in Lahaina is because guess who was on these whaling vessels then? There was a lot of Portuguese there already. This is sold in Vladivostok. I thought that was pretty interesting. Anyway, so there you go. There's definitive proof of these vessels. And this is in Salisbury. Other than the number, nothing here was jumping out. Brazil, lost in St. Helena, Nova Scotia. But look at the size too, like the size. So ships here, you can see a number at 400, in terms of tonnage, you're getting fairly good sized vessels here. And then schooners, hey, there's the Georgia. That's you. They're down to schooners here. You can see out of Salisbury, tonnage is a little low. There's our Essex. So 238 tons, stowed by whale, 1820. And this is Bethany, this is a logbook with Eben Bradbury, well, there's a record of Eben Bradbury in Georgia at the top. I wasn't able to read it. The trouble, but even though you can optically scan, the trouble with these logbooks is it's all in cursive, and the computer can't decipher cursive, so you literally have to go through thousands of logbooks, and somebody has to be trained up. Another reason why we need volunteers. And money. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but this is, well, I should dwell on this only to say, I was able to get this from a website, and Sharon, I think you had something to do with this website, creating it at the archives, if I'm not mistaken. So this is an absolutely fantastic resource, so thanks for putting this together. And you can see some, it talks about the Navy here, for instance. The Navy went out with the Merrimack. But it's great to see these names here, like here's Greenleaf Wharf, just absolutely fantastic. I found this fascinating. A mammoth jawbone was exhibited at the Newburyport Museum. That was before you were around. I think that's before Moon. I don't know where that.
That was in my early 40s.
It was 12 cents to get in. I had these guys in for nothing today. So here's, again, encouraging people to get into the game, right? Whale oil used for lights and other purposes, but millions. Newburyport is in the thick of it. Here's a guy called Russell. Maybe that's why I like this. Anyway, he's doing something about it. Here's the Merrimack. A very typical voyage leaves, goes to Cape Verde or probably the Azores first, but you go around, you pick up the trade winds. You get, very often the cruise would leave with light cruise. You can easily get to the Azores, and the crew there is a lot cheaper to pay than you'd have if you have to do it in the States. So very often they would go with light cruise, go to Cape Verde. In this case, it's around Africa. And then you're coming through the Indian Ocean here, over through New Zealand. There's a lot of activity. At some point, I'll have to tell you about the greatest prison escape of Irish prisoners from Australia on a whaler. That'll be a later day. And then around the Horn and back. Great cruise. And by the way, beautiful renderings here at the bottom. I just think this is fantastic. Beautifully done by Jeff. Okay, this is a little complicated, but what you have here is light blue, the days when none of the 5 species of whales were seen. Then you have days with more sperm whale. Then you've got right whales that are sighted or caught, so on and so forth. But here's the point. Early on, you've got smaller vessels. You don't have as many vessels, and you're kind of going, you know, mostly in the Atlantic area, right? A little bit down here by Pernambuco, and maybe up to Valparaiso. And then by 1820s, you're getting out to Hawaii for the first time. Here you're all over the world, because all the light blues are when whales weren't sighted. Look at this curious line. Melville talks about this in Moby Dick. He talks about the line. These are sperm whales that are caught here. These are northern, these are south, these would be South Pacific right whales, sperm whale. This is bowhead whale. The bowhead whale has got a lot of baleen. You can see them hunting off Fremantle, off Australia, off New Zealand. And then it all but peters out by the time you get into 1875. This is a compilation of all the above. By the way, massive decimation of the gray whale in Baja, once they figured out that that was a great place to, that's where the gray whale went to mate, and they found that out, and they were able to slaughter the gray whale. Jack, I don't know whether I can get this to work. Let me try. Maybe not. Okay, if it doesn't, no worry. Check this out online. It's by Ben Schmidt at MIT. And what he did was, and by the way, there's a reason for me telling you this. Imagine if we were able to document the voyages of every vessel that left from here via the records that are in Rowley, right? And then you plot them, and this is plotted over a period to about this is 1855, and then you get a density pattern, and you can see where the whalers went. I'll send this out by a link on Constant Contact, and you'll enjoy seeing it. Whew. Okay, how we doing? Everybody okay? Okay, so I had to put this in because I've just come from Nantucket, but it made me think that, of course, there wasn't I-95 to go down to the Cape back in the day. The quickest way to get around was by boat. And gee, it's probably not a surprise that Coffin, Hussey, Macy, Greenleaf, Pike, Starbuck all have connections with up here. So I think they owe us something, is what I'm saying. Aren't these great? I just actually love these stories. And I won't expound on this much. Okay, now I want to talk about one of the most important vessels in American maritime history, and it's the Essex. So, built here, we've already noted that previous vessel was captained by Pollard Sr., and the Essex was stowed by a whale in the Pacific. After they went to the Galapagos, they went further afield. There were 20 sailors on board. It was abandoned. 3 whaleboats with crew went. They were terrified to go west because of reports of cannibalism and the closer islands, and so they decided to come 2,000 miles east. 3 months later, 5 were emaciated sailors were rescued, 3 were on a deserted island, and they resorted to cannibalism. This is a drawing by Nicholson, which is in Nantucket, and it's the ship Essex with the sperm whale attacking it. And this is the raft of the Medusa, just to put this in context. Again, cannibalism. This is not unusual at sea. There's actually law around this. It happened actually in the Andes where a rugby team, a plane crashed there, and they resorted to cannibalism. But this is the Raft of the Medusa by Jericho. This was an inspiration for Melville, Mocha Dick. This was sometime before he wrote his book. But it was a white whale that was off South America, off Peru. And here is the narrative. This is the inside page of a very rare book. There are 6 of these books which are known to exist in the world today. It's a narrative written by Owen Chase. It says, of the most extraordinary and distressing shipwreck of the whale ship Essex of Nantucket, which was attacked and finally destroyed by a large spermaceti whale in the Pacific Ocean, with an account of the unparalleled suffering of the captain and crew, by Owen Chase in 1821. So just bear with me for a moment. I'm just going to read this quick, because it's really good. This is Owen Chase. I observed a very large spermaceti whale as well as I could judge, about 85 feet in length. It broke water about 20 rods off our weather bow and was lying quietly with its head in the direction of the ship. It spouted 2 or 3 times and then disappeared. In less than 2 or 3 seconds, it came up again about the length of the ship off and made directly for us at the rate of 3 knots. The ship was then going about the same velocity. His appearance and attitude gave us at first no alarm, but while I stood watching his movements and observing him, But as ship slammed off, coming down as with great celerity, I involuntarily ordered the boy at the helm to put it hard up, intending to steer him and avoid him. The words were scarcely out of my mouth before he had come down upon us with full speed and struck the ship with his head, just forward of the forechains. He gave us such an appalling and tremendous jar as nearly threw us all in our faces. The ship brought out as suddenly and violently as being struck a rock, as if it had struck a rock, and tumbled for a few seconds like a leaf. We looked at each other with perfect amazement, deprived most of the power of speech. Many minutes elapsed before we were able to realize the dreadful accident, during which time he passed under the ship, grazing her keel as he went along, come up alongside of her to leeward, and lay on top of the water, apparently stunned with the violence of the blow, for a space of a minute. He then suddenly started off in the direction leeward. After a moment's reflection and recovering in some small measure from the sudden consternation that had seized us, I of course concluded that he had stove a hole in the ship, and that it would be necessary to set the pumps going. Accordingly, they were rigged, but had not been in operation more than a minute before I perceived the head of the ship to be gradually settling down in the water. I then ordered the signal to be set for the other boats, which scarcely I had dispatched, before I again discovered the whale, apparently in convulsions on top of the water, about 100 rods to leeward. He was enveloped in the foam of the sea, and his continual and violent thrashing about in the water had created around him. And I could distinctly see him smite his jaws together as if distracted with rage and fury. By this time, the ship had settled down a considerable distance in the water, and I gave her up for lost. That was written by Owen Chase right after. That's his first-hand account. That is his first-hand account of the whale ship Essex, and now for the day to reveal. So a friend heard I was going to give this talk. I've known him for the better part of 15 years or so. And he says, I've got something that your audience might like to see. So I mentioned that there were 6 of these books in the world today. And that is a copy, and that is one of the 6 of Owen Chase's original. So you're welcome to look at this afterwards. And it's behind glass because I don't want your paws getting My friend also gave me over here, you may know Rockwell Kent, a great illustrationist, 1930s or so. And he wrote 3 volumes, and these are the original Rockwell Kent books, and I opened them up to a couple of pages. You'll recognize these drawings here, and I'm very grateful for this person for supporting us. And I brought them up here, and I know that he hopes that you will enjoy them as much as I do. To that, in New Bedford, and Jack Harvey's here, and he was reading Moby Dick. He was reading Moby Dick down in Massachusetts. And when I was talking to Beth Welsh last week or 2 weeks ago, I thought, gee, why couldn't we have a similar thing? Maybe we have a reading on Marquand. That would be something which is germane and appropriate. So if there's interest in that, let me know. Okay, we move on. 5 minutes? Okay, got it. Okay, I'm going to speed through some of these, and I think I may just leave 20th century later. So with any business, there's boom and bust. Wars are never good. Civil War was particularly bad. Bethany, thanks. I lifted this right off your website. This is the fire that took place in 1811. Never good for business. This is a donation from the Institute of Savings. And by the way, the lifeboat was also from Institute of Savings. It was in their vault. And this is the Greg General Worth offering to bring people around the Horn. And then, of course, as these vessels went from brigs and schooners into much heavier vessels, the sandbar, just like the sandbar in Nantucket for that matter, caused a great deal of consternation today if you're trying to get vessels in and out. I put this slide in, it's from Vanity Fair, 1861. Isn't it awesome? And this is Drake, this is, what was his first name? Anyway, Drake's oil well in Titusville. This is where they figured out how to capture oil that I talked about earlier. Grand ball given by the whales in honor of discovery of oil wells. This is San Francisco. So when they decided they didn't need oil because they had figured out cheaper, safer ways to get it on land, well, the poor bowhead whale up in that Sea of Oshkosh or whatever, unlike the baleen that Bill showed you earlier, which is from the North Atlantic right whale or the humpback, that baleen is quite short. The bowhead, the baleen could be, well, there's a jack, and that's the size of the baleen in a bowhead whale. And this was in high demand. As a matter of fact, it completely flipped. Prior, you would capture the whale, cut the head off, let that go, other than the mandible and the teeth and the like. You wanted the blubber and the body. Now, you cut the head off, you don't need the oil, that's too hard. It's not selling for a whole lot of money, not worth the effort. You just want the head. Complete flip. And then there was a devastating shock to the whale oil business in '71 when 33 of the vessels, there were one or two from Newburyport that got caught up here. Fronts moved in, they weren't expecting it, and there was massive capital loss as a result. National Park Service discovered one of these vessels about 10 years ago. I'm going to hop over that slide, and I think I'd better have another lecture on this because I've got about another 30, 40 slides. But we're up to about 95 degrees in here, so I thank you for your time. I might take just a couple of questions and then I'll be around afterwards to answer more specific questions. Sure.
This, we should all be honored to have James here now because
I think so.
because he is focusing on Newburyport history. In my research, and James, when we saw that bucket, along with that, that could probably be the last one in the world. So it's great to have stuff like that in this museum. It's great to have him like in my bucket.
I have to show you one other slide. Only because this is one of the coolest items. Okay, see this? So I'm on the phone with these guys, this is years ago, and this is before Skype and all the rest. It was a big deal to get remote. So we have a classroom up in North Battle, and we're talking to New Bedford. And we're halfway through, we took about 6 months to get set up for this. And we're talking to them, and they said, sorry, we gotta go. I said, what do you do? You gotta go. We just spent a lot of money getting this video feed together. And they go, yeah, but we just spotted our first whale of the year. We gotta go out to hunt it. So you see the guys at the bottom? Check that out. This is just the sweetest thing. That is seal skin. I know it's seal skin. You use saliva to clean it. And that's a Inubia, an Inuit, sorry, in Inubia. And that is probably caribou bone or whale bone for the harpoon. And this is from 1850, and this came to us as part of a gift from Moon. So this is absolutely gorgeous. I just think it's amazing.
Beautiful.
I'll end with this. If you guys don't ask me any questions, there's ivory and ivory, and this is obviously a whale tusk. And this came here about 20 years after Commodore Perry opened up Japan in '55. And it's beautifully carved, probably for the souvenir business, but it's amazing to have it here. and a great example. So, I think that's what I got for you, unless there's somebody burning to ask a question with a group like this.
I understand I don't know if you were involved, they're using whale books and logs to check climate change.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Was that in New Bedford they were doing that, or?
Yeah, that was a great project. So, the Navy was going up to Alaska probably in obviously it would have been before 1869, I think the purchase. And so probably the Navy was up before that, right? But when the Navy goes, they get very, very detailed recordings, winds and conditions and temperature and depths. But there was a period when the Navy wasn't there. So we were talking to NOAA, and they wanted to build an algorithm to try to project out future patterns in climate change. So the way they described it, they said, we don't need exact data, but the more we can interpolate and go back in time, the better. And so both in Nantucket, Mystic, Stonington, and obviously New Bedford, where there's something like 2,000 logbooks. We went through those logbooks for, the chaps that we were just talking about who were up in that neck of the woods, looking for currents. For instance, if the fronts came in early that year or not, and they were able to use that data that we found to help their algorithm. It's a really interesting process, project. Art.
James, I just want to say it's great that you and Delia became Newburyport.
And Art, thanks for your apartment.
Quick navigation problem with, question is, when they went on that Nantucket sled ride, and they threw the harpoon, what prevented the whale from going under and having these guys go take a nosedive in their boats?
Well, that's why they had a hatchet on board. Oh, yeah, well, they would have a line. The whale boats were actually quite light, but all the stuff that they had in the whale boats, they would have so much line and these fins. They would have harpoons and lances, water, because as it was being dragged along, they'd have the loggerhead would get heated. Actually, they have a little ladle. The whale boats themselves were heavily laden. So when you see pictures of a whale boat being tossed, you'll see a lot of stuff coming out of it. But yes, if the whale sounded, they were ready to cut that line. Otherwise, they were going to pitch, and they'd obviously be brought out there. That was pretty dangerous.
I was just wondering about the mesothelioma that you said you were interested in. Were you serious about that? And why are you interested in that particular item, and how much is good value?
So why would I be interested in a mesotent with handwriting by Benjamin Franklin with the revolution coming up? Direct connection to Newburyport to the specific
Can I add to that? You may not know, Ben Franklin was a frequent visitor to Newburyport because he had family here. The family was the Davenports. They have old buildings and houses down, and that is documented in Franklin's handwriting is given to his grandniece in Newburyport. So we would, I'm sure between us or the Museum of Old Newbury, we would love to bring that back. $10,000. It's on auction this Thursday, 9 a.m.
Not on that, but I think the audience might be interested to learn how they got spermaceti out of the sperm whale.
Okay. So just to close out on that, the answer is yes, but it's certainly not written into our plan. So if there is, we are most certainly. Are you interested?
Of course.
Sure. Spermaceti. So the head of the sperm whale. I didn't talk about echolocation, it's just such a vast subject, but like sonar today, well, whales would ping out and they're able to receive back, and we actually don't know how this works. There are all kind of crazy theories on it. But the idea is that in the head of the whale, this spermaceti is such a large cavity, and perhaps even the shape of the sperm whale, which is almost like a radar dish. It doesn't conform to the outside like our skeleton. That somehow this is helping with echolocation. So that substance is different from the blubber, right, as I mentioned earlier, and it's called spermaceti. So they would cut off the head, and there was that picture with the mandible thrusting up. They would cut off the head, they hold that on board, and then the smallest guy in the crew has got the pleasure of being hoisted down through a hole that they cut. And you got a bucket and you bucket it out. Probably not unlike this bucket over here.
Let's take one more question, Jack. Jack?
Oh my God, I thought I was going to go to a lecture without a question from Jack.
You talked about Newburyport building whaling vessels. I'm wondering, was Newburyport also building vessels for the American Navy?
Okay, somebody else is going to be jumping in here in a moment. So we know that the revenue cutter Massachusetts was built, right? That's one of the reasons why we're able to say the birthplace of the Coast Guard. There were gondolas built because we know that Benedict Arnold left here. Okay, now this is where my 2 months. Oh, say yes.
Yes. So the first one, 1798, the USS Merrimack lost from right there. And this is a great story because at that time, it was right after the Revolutionary War. We didn't have the money for a Navy. They had destroyed all our Navy ships after winning the Revolution, said we don't need them anymore. And our ships started getting attacked by pirates. So Newburyport merchants said, we need a Navy to protect our ships. They raised, 10 merchants raised the money to build a ship and gave it to the Navy. After we did that, Philadelphia, New York, all gave ships to the Navy. It was about the same time that the USS Constitution was built. And that was the start of USA.
There you go. I knew that.